Hi everyone, my name is Karen Huang. I'm a PhD candidate at Harvard, and today I'll be talking about the veil of ignorance and support for utilitarian self-driving car policies. The philosopher John Rawls posited a thought experiment to help people decide what kind of society they would want to live in. In this thought experiment, people imagine not knowing their position in society, such as their class, race, gender, or other factors. And Rawls called this state of not knowing as being behind the veil of ignorance. Behind the veil, knowing that you could be anyone in society, your own self-interest would drive making more impartial decisions. And in this research, we use the veil of ignorance as an inspiration to create a reasoning induction to help people reason about a common set of moral problems. Our research is driven by these questions. Does the veil of ignorance reasoning influence moral judgment and policy preferences regarding self-driving cars? In the first experiment, I'm going to be testing this paradigm using the trolley problem, and in the second experiment, we're going to be using the modern day trolley problem. So in study one, we use the infamous Footbridge case, and in this case, there are 5 people on the tracks and 1 person on the footbridge, and you are the decision maker in blue. And if you push the person from the footbridge onto the tracks, you will save the 5 on the tracks, and if you don't push, then the 5 on the tracks will die. And our dependent measure in this case was, is it morally acceptable for you to push? And the utilitarian choice would be to push, since that would maximize the total number of lives. So all participants in the experiment completed this. Importantly, beforehand, half of the participants received the veil of ignorance manipulation, and I'll explain this in detail. In this induction, we asked the participants to imagine that they have a 5 out of 6 chance of being one of the people on the tracks, and a 1 out of 6 chance of being the person on the footbridge. So if the decision maker pushes, then you have a 1 out of 6 chance of dying. If the decision maker does not push, then you have a 5 out of 6 chance of dying. So just to clarify, all the participants in the study completed the Footbridge case, and only half of the participants received the veil of ignorance manipulation. Participants in the control condition did not receive any exercise before completing the Footbridge case. So here are the results from study 1. On the y-axis is the probability of making the utilitarian judgment. Is it morally acceptable for you as the decision maker to push? So in the control condition, we find that about 24% say yes, and this replicates findings from prior studies. Importantly, people in the veil of ignorance condition were more likely to make the utilitarian judgment. And prior research also shows that it's very hard to change people's moral judgments using reasoning, and we showed that the veil of ignorance reasoning increases utilitarian judgment. In the next study, we wanted to bring this question to the realm of policies. So we wanted to use a case regarding self-driving cars. And in the first talk this morning, you heard that people approve of utilitarian self-driving cars, but people don't approve of utilitarian policies regarding self-driving cars. And we wanted to see if the veil of ignorance induction could close this gap between wanting utilitarian self-driving cars and supporting utilitarian policies for them. So in this next study, we used this self-driving car case where the car is going down the road and 9 pedestrians appear ahead. It could either swerve and saving the 9 pedestrians and killing the driver, or continue down, killing the 9 pedestrians without harming the driver. And our DV was a policy choice. Is it morally acceptable for state law to require self-driving cars to swerve in this situation? And the utilitarian choice would be to support the state law. And so all the participants received this case, and importantly, beforehand, half of the participants received the veil of ignorance manipulation, where we asked them to imagine that they could either be one of the pedestrians or that they could be the passenger in the self-driving car. So if the law requires the car to swerve, then you have a 1 out of 10 chance of dying. If the law requires the car to stay, then you have a 9 out of 10 chance of dying. And this injects self-interest and care for each person in this situation. So here are the results. In the control condition, about 58% supported the utilitarian policy. And in the veil of ignorance condition, 83% supported the utilitarian policy. So in conclusion, we find that the veil of ignorance influences moral judgment. Specifically, it increases the likelihood of making utilitarian choices and encourages welfare maximizing decisions. And importantly, the veil of ignorance may make the utilitarian choice seen more morally acceptable and could potentially address this social dilemma of self-driving cars and close this gap between preferring utilitarian self-driving cars and supporting utilitarian policies for them. I would like to thank my co-authors, Josh Green and Max Bazerman, and thank you very much for listening.
Or they were one of the pedestrians. Would you not get similar effects?
So we think that the perspective taking is definitely also involved in the veil of ignorance, but we also think that this is a type of reasoning that makes people think in a more impartial way, and they're using this impartial reasoning to then apply to subsequent moral judgments.
Applied to designers if they know that they are designing for customers. Like, you said about the practical implication, how exactly this applies? So when you know that you are designer for customers, it's like, I'm having a hard time connecting the dots. Like,
I think that potentially when you're designing a policy, you could help people believe that that policy is more morally acceptable if you give people this thought experiment or have them think about if they could be any one of these people, what outcome would they want or what policy they would want. Right now, yeah, we're thinking about it as a practical policy implication.